internationally. So part of maybe just a bit of background, Distell was founded in 2000, but it was founded by two entities, Distillers Corporation and Stellenbosch Farmers Winery. That's got a great heritage, obviously, and deep roots in the South African industry, specifically around Stellenbosch area. So Stellenbosch Farmers obviously came around the 1918, they already were established. Distillers Corporation followed a couple of years later, and together they've got an amazing portfolio of brands. And some of them wine brands, but we're very big into cider as well. So cider, we've got Amarula cream, so cream liqueurs. We've got RTDs, ready to drinks, that like Bernini, and then a strong wine portfolio as well, like for instance Nederburg, Zonnebloem, Durbanville Hills, Pomgras, the ones that you are already well known with. So the firstly, to be successful internationally, you need to have the right product. I think that's self-explanatory, but the right product comes with time and a lot of investment. So to take an example like Nederburg, for instance, that's our biggest international wine brand. It's also under the top 50 most admired brands in South Africa. And if you think of the brand being old, it's been around since 1791. It's actually quite amazing that the brand has been able to develop that way, because you need to keep on refreshing it without changing too much of the intrinsics or the background of the brand and the history. So what we do with Nederburg, for instance, just to give you an idea, we sell in 82 different countries. So, and that's pretty big. It's really a pity we can't show you the maps, but to give you an idea that in 82 countries, maybe to start off with, we reliant on the South African market heavily as well. So 45% is still South Africa. The amount of wine that we sell is in South Africa, 45%. Then it's 45% international, and then 10% in Africa. So, and then we've got a very much a targeted approach. We've got investment markets and we've got sustained markets. So, and we work very closely with Woza being the biggest South African exporter then on the strategy. So what we do purely with wine now, and this is not spirits, for instance, or I'll talk about spirits and ciders a bit later on, but for wine, we follow a strategy of, like I said, investment markets. So for us, for the next 5 years, the investment markets are the UK, still, because we've lost a lot of share there. Then there's Sweden, that we've also lost share, so we need to invest there again. And then Canada, which is a difficult market to get into. I'll get to that in a few minutes. And then China, Hong Kong, so the Far East, basically, is also very important to us in the sense of some investment markets. So that's pretty much where we'll put money in distribution, route to market. We'll try and get new agents. That's the places where we'll go with trade shows. We do quite a few trade shows a year. So, but then there's also a maintenance market. So if you think of a brand like Nederburg, for instance, we sell close to 11 million liters of wine. If you think of one bottle of Baron, which is obviously a popular wine, is the most of, the best-selling red wine in South Africa. I think it's still it's an amazing wine actually. But if you think of it globally, it sells every 14 seconds a bottle gets opened. So it's about interacting with the customers and making sure that they like it. To give you an idea, Baron is not really sold internationally because the name doesn't mean anything for the international consumer. It's really heavily dependent on South Africa, the biggest SKU then in our range. So Baron would be South Africa and Southern Africa. So we're very strong in Namibia, Botswana, and then in South Africa with a range like Baron. But as soon as you go international, you need to pitch yourself differently as well. And you'll know, for instance, Heineken has done it very successfully, where Heineken in Holland is just an average beer. I mean, it's like what we would have in South Africa, say a Black Label or Castle. But as soon as they go abroad, they've got a strategy of being much more premium. So in South Africa, if we buy Heineken, it's at a premium price point, and then that's also their strategy was like that. And that's what we've done with Nederburg as well, where Nederburg, successful in South Africa, has been around for a long time, but the success is really driven by what I call the popular premium type of ranges. So like your rosé, your Nederburg rosé, the Baron is a very heavy skew for us. But it's difficult sometimes to premiumize if you've started something at a lower price point. So the cap for South African market is around 100 rand a bottle. So that's where you really move volume. And that's also what Nederburg is good with, is moving a large amount of wine at a decent price point and always over what do you call it, sorry, my English is now running out. I don't know if I'm on pay as you go or I haven't topped up yet. You're over delivering on quality. So the quality price point ratio is very important for us. But also, as soon as you move abroad, there's different taste palettes. And I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that, being chefs and apprentice chefs and sommeliers, for instance, that the person that eats breakfast in the UK is different to the person that eats breakfast in Canada or in America. In Canada, America, it's flapjacks and a lot of sugars and half and half milk type of cream. And in the UK, it might be bangers and mash, or it might be bacon and eggs. So there's different palettes. What I have found over the last 20 years that I've been in the industry is that everybody likes something that's a bit sweeter, and definitely accessibility is always important. I mean, you can't compromise on accessibility. You can have the best possible wine. We've, for instance, got a wine in our stable that's the 2 Centuries Cabernet, which is one of the most awarded wines, but also been nominated as the best cab in the world. Obviously, Nederburg being good at cab, that's to us quite important to keep that flag. But still, if you drink the wine, it needs to be 100% ready when you bottle it. It can't wait in the bottle and think that you're going to age it for 10 years and it's going to get better. So accessibility from day one needs to be there, even if it's a 500 rand or 1,000 rand bottle of wine compared to a 50 rand bottle of wine. That same accessibility needs to be there. It needs to be generous. It needs to be, if it's red, it needs to be deep in color. You don't find internationally that people will easily pick up a wine that's like light in color. You've got Chiantis for that. So it's from South Africa. They feel it needs to be dark in color, needs to be berry flavors, so fruit flavors, fruit forward flavors, not too much oak. We found is a tendency nowadays, whereas in, say, 10 years ago, we had a saying of no wood, no good. And it's basically Australia that gave that to us, where they bombarded the wines with a lot of American oak, vanilla flavors. And what we found is that the wines were showstoppers. They were really amazing, and they won all the competitions in that year because they're so much they're so much more powerful than, for instance, the wines of, say, the Northern Hemisphere or even South Africa. So South Africa followed suit, and we did it as well successfully, and made wines that were big and bold and lots of oak flavors. But they're not really food wines. They're not wines per se that shows regionality or shows the grape or the source or the microclimate of where it comes from. And that provenance is important, and it's become more important over the last 5 years, that people want to taste the grape. They want to taste where it's actually grown and have minimum influence of oak. What we found with the oaking, and we followed suit, like I said, with Australia, but after 5 years of aging those wines, you find that the oak, and specifically the American oak, stands apart. It's like a triangle. You've got oak, fruit, and acidity, and then that's basically it. It's never really, it never developed properly going forward. Whereas in the beginning, 2-3 years, it's fantastic. Everything is there. It's powerful. It's got that bang for your buck, but yeah, it doesn't develop, it doesn't show the true essence of wine. South Africa and Nederburg, then specifically, what we do is we go for the freshness. Freshness for us is quite important. The oak and where we, the grapes and where we grow it is important. But to be able to give the reach that we've got, we need to adapt our styles also then to different types of markets. Like I said, America, there's always a sweeter, but it's not sweet necessarily in sugar, but it's actually they are a bit sweeter in sugar. Let's be honest, they like a wine. If you think of wines that's popular, like Apothic Red, the Apothic Red range. Maybe some of you have tasted it before. It's a good one to go and Google as well. It's an amazing track record that the wine has got, but it's got 18 grams of sugar, so that's quite sweet if you think dry for South Africa is 4 and 5 grams of sugar is the classification at the top end of dry. So for America, I would have, for instance, Cabernet Sauvignon, say the Wine Masters Cabernet, which is our very good Cabernet, a concentrated fruit from Stellenbosch, from the Nederburg farm, from Durbanville Hills, from Philadelphia. So proper big cabs, but still with the freshness. Oak, obviously a lot less oak keenness nowadays than what it was in the past. In the past, we would use 100% new barrel up to a point, and nowadays I think we're on 20% of new oak, and then the rest would be third, second, third, and fourth fill. So you can see how we've scaled back the oaking, but still, if you go for that same blend, say it's a 1 million liter blend, if you go to America, you would add, say, 6 grams of sugar, and if you do it in Europe, you would keep it dry, purely because of the palate. But it's also easy to do it that way because of the different regulations you've got with back labels. So you need to have a separate bottling anyway, sorry, for America than you will have for Europe. So there's basically 3 big areas that we call it Latin America that we look at. But Latin America would then include Americas, Canada, America, and then Brazil. So South America, that's really only Brazil. Chile does their own wines, Argentina does their own wines, so that doesn't really count for us as an export market. Then in Europe, we've got very big, and it's an old established wine drinking market would be Germany and Holland. Holland obviously gives us a lot of support, Germany as well. Nederburg is really the only wine that does under the top 10 brands in Germany. The rest of South Africa still struggles a bit with Germany, but Germany is also a strange market where they're very price sensitive. But the tax laws are also different and the duties that you pay. So you would find that you sell a wine in the UK at, say, £10 a bottle, which would be, say, again, the Wine Masters range. But that same bottle would only be like €5.99. And then it's difficult to make the comparison because it's actually supposed to be, say, €12. But their tax laws, like I said, and duties are so low. And as soon as you go over €6 a bottle in the retail outlets, then the sales just drop off. So you've got that fine balance. Do you choose on-trade or do you choose retail? So what we do, and that's again part of our strategy, is we'll have different ranges for different channels. So for retail, for instance, we'll have a certain range, but then for on-trade, we would have like the Heritage Heroes range, which is much more crafty, smaller volumes, higher price points. Then we would have a different range again for GTR, which is Global Travel Retail, which is now dead, but normally is quite big for us. If you think of the duty-free shops, you know, it's all the top-end wines or the top-end spirits, but it's also unique offerings that they sometimes have there, because they don't want people to compare that to what they can find on shelf, or the same in restaurants, for instance. You normally want a unique offering. Something that Nederburg does quite well, and that's definitely expanded our reach in Scandinavia and more in the markets where, for the on-trade, specifically with sommeliers, is to do matured wines. So we would, for instance, each year hold back 20% of a certain wine and release that again in 10 years' time. So then the restaurateur doesn't mind putting it on its wine list because you won't find it in retail anymore. But it's still an affordable wine by the glass, for instance, and it's 10 years old. That matured wine, we get money for aging it, so there's definitely added value. But it's the same SKU, but just the holding cost for us makes it worth our while to enter then into the retail or to the on-trade market with that strategy. It's obviously cost effective, or it's very costly to do it, to start with doing it. But once you're in the cycle, it's fine. Then you know, but it helps to maybe have a big company like Distell behind you. The only other company that I know does it successfully is Kanonkop. So where they also release vintages after 10 years, they would release a certain amount of the wine again. So that is said. So reach. Okay, we've talked about Europe. Maybe another one that that's the investment market for us now is Canada, like I said, and Sweden. So Sweden is a bit of an anomaly. They've always loved South Africa white wine. So we're number 2 when it comes to white wine drinking in Sweden, which is actually strange because you would think that, we're the 7th largest or 8th largest producer of wine, that it's a monopoly system that they've got. So you've got buyers that come to South Africa and say, okay, they need to give to their customers, they need to give what the best wines that they can and what they want. Now, what we mean with the monopoly system is that the wine buying is actually done by the state, so by the government. It's like, imagine you would have in South Africa, you would just have a Tops. You wouldn't have a Macro, or you wouldn't have a Distell or any of those. You would just have Topses everywhere. And all the Topses belong to the state, and they've got exactly the same offering. So that's a monopoly system. They obviously score because they regulate what gets sold. So, but they also get all the income from the wine sales. And there's a couple of countries that actually does it that way. So the Nordics is the Nordic monopolies would be Sweden, Denmark. Denmark is not; it's a free country, or it's a free open system now. So they've only changed it the last 10 years. Sweden is a heavy regulated monopoly. Norway is a heavy regulated monopoly, and also Finland. So how it works is you can't just go and sell your wine to the restaurateur, for instance, in Sweden. You need to go and you need to make a pitch to the government and say, okay, say for instance for your top end wine, let's say the 2 Centuries. It's not something that you're going to sell in the Systembolaget, which is the equivalent to Tops. It's the government-owned stores, because the volume is too small and maybe the price is too expensive. So you need to then go to the restaurateur and ask them to list the wine or show interest in the wine, and then the government have to order it, because their ruling is that within 2 days they can get any wine from anywhere in the world. And so they've got a serious good distribution system actually in Sweden as the one example. Norway, so Sweden is important to us in the sense that we've actually got an abnormal share in market share in white, but we've dropped for the last 3 years now, we've dropped from 2nd place all the way down to 4th place. So, and that means we've lost about 60 million liters of export wine just in Sweden, which is not good, and that's why we've put it in the investment market. So what we'll do typically is we'll get the buyers out to South Africa as a country. You can't do it as Nederburg or as Canonco. We need to work through our organization, Wines of South Africa, and we'll make a pitch and say, but listen, we need to try and do something, we've got these brilliant new style wines, make it interesting for them, and then they come to South Africa and we show them a variety of wines, and they go back then and they say, okay, we'll write a tender for a white wine that's fragrant. It needs to have this much oak and it needs to be from Stellenbosch. So, and then everybody that can fit those criteria can actually enter into this tender. And it's a blind tasting. First, it's a paper admin tender to see that all the boxes are ticked. And then it will be a blind tasting that gets done by not the person, the South African buyer. It will be done by all the other buyers. The South African buyer will just brief the other buyer, say the guys from Europe, or the buyer that looks after America or Australia. They will brief them and say, this is the style of wine that I was looking for. And so he can't actually go and taste the favorite that he wants to choose. It's just reliant on him explaining exactly what he wants, and then the other buyers will taste for that. And that's the way that you then go into the tender. You, for instance, win the tender. And then it's pretty nice business to do because it's large volumes, it's big distribution, it's simple. They know how to forecast. They pay on time. It's decent money, so it's worth our while to do it that way. Then, for instance, another country, the Nordics, we can say works pretty. Norway and Finland works similar. The other one that's quite interesting and not a lot of people know about is Canada. So as a country, Canada has got a few states and they also heavily regulate it. And it comes still from Prohibition time, when there was a lot of border trade obviously taking place. And so, for instance, you've got Ontario, which is where Toronto is. They would have the LCBO, which is also then they've all got different rules and different taste profiles. So, for instance, Quebec, where Quebec City is more French, they would have a higher percentage of French and European wines, whereas Ontario, which is more, say, Western style, they would support America a lot more, but then also South Africa, there would be a big focus on South African wine in their stores. They, again, don't do blind tastings. They look at the price point and the label. The label to them is extremely important because it needs to stand out. And they, again, have got different rulings, and there it becomes, it's not environmental, it's not driven by environmental changes, like, say, for instance, going green and doing lighter bottles. They request lighter bottles for a certain price point, but it's because of their their labor laws that says that a person is not allowed to pick up a certain amount of weight. So for that reason, they then go for something less than 420 grams per bottle. And they've got a ruling, for instance, or a rule that says that if the wine sells up to $17, then it needs to be in a lightweight bottle. So again, that brings complexity, because now you've got your Cabernet bottle. I've got, say, a beautiful, my Wine Masters Cabernet bottle that I could show you if we could share. But it's at 600 grams because it's got a crest, it's tall, but the same wine now needs to go to Canada in a normal flint bottle and a thinner bottle because of the rules there. So it gets complicated in the sense of you would like to have as little as possible SKUs, obviously, and put momentum behind those SKUs. That's how you really build brands. But the rules of playing in international waters is different. So just think about it now. You've got the sugar that we've now adjusted for America. So that's one specific bottling. You've got also then the bottle weight that needs to be a different bottle, obviously also a different label for Canada. And you've got Europe, for instance. So there's already 3 different types of, not the same wine, but 3 different SKUs. So then if you go to the Far East, they, again, very finicky on additives. So you're not allowed, for instance, to add any gelatin or animal proteins. So they don't like it. So for instance, if you want to, luckily all our wines are vegan friendly. From when I started there was 2017. All the wines are vegan friendly. It's a trend, and it's not just a trend, it's also a hygiene factor nowadays. So there's certain things that you need to do to just play. So they again don't want any CMC, which is something that we add to avoid crystals forming. You don't do cold stabilization anymore. You add the CMC now. This is where it gets funny. They allow CMC, for instance, in yogurt and ice cream, but they don't allow it in wine. I mean, it's the same product, but their rules are finicky. If you go to Japan, and it's a lovely country to work with, and it's one of the friendliest countries I think I've ever been to, and the cleanest. It's, again, different. They want something like 100% inspection. So it means that there can't be, we work on a default rate of one, there might be one bottle that the label is skew or the capsule gets missed in 10 million bottles that gets bottled. So 1 in 10 million, that to us is acceptable. For them, it's not acceptable. So they will look at everything. So you need to double handle the same product now on this side. Besides that, it's a different label. You need to make sure that it gets 100% inspected on this side before you export it to Japan, because they will, if they find something wrong, they will just close the container and send it back to you, or say it's your problem to dismiss it on that side. So that all makes wine more complex in selling it and playing in the global market. And I do believe that's why we're not that successful as a country to be able to play internationally. You'll find, for instance, if you look at SA Wine, the SA Wine site that was Save SA Wine, that there's a lot of Nederburg that was chosen to be drunk. And the reason for it is that we can actually do all these different bottlings, and we have got the reach to be able to do it. A smaller winery just don't have the capacity or don't have the appetite for it. We do have the appetite for it. There is returns in it on it, but it comes at a big price. I mean, my best bottle of wine that I sell is the one that I actually sell to Macro or to Checkers. I mean, I make more money there. Obviously, first price is to sell it yourself off the farm. Second price then is to go into retail. So you make more money there. And it's interesting that a lot of wineries and winemakers talk about international, and they spend a lot of money to go to trade fairs. It's a fluctuation in exchange rate that you can't really do anything about. And to build a business plan on when the pound is 20 versus a pound of 14 is not. It's actually doing something that you then become a trader instead of a winemaker, and you lose the appetite really. I think if your business model is not robust enough, so if you're relying just on exchange rate, which is not something that we like to do. So what I'm trying to say is that there's not a lot of wineries that would go through all this effort and be successful in being in the international market. And because of how South Africa is structured and our wineries are structured, we've got a lot of smaller wineries, but not that many big brands that can actually do it and have size. I mean, if we, for instance, sell wine in America, the opening order would be something like 10,000 cases. So think of 10,000 cases would be 90,000 liters. That would be half the wineries in South Africa sells less than 90,000 liters. So, they're not interested in looking at something smaller than that because of just how big it actually is, how big it can be internationally. But yeah, that gives you limited scope because you might have 2 or 3 big brands that does it. Boschendal being one of them. KWV is a successful international brand, but that comes from many years ago when they were the only ones to be allowed to sell internationally. So prior to apartheid, or apartheid, basically the apartheid era when KWV controlled the whole wine industry. That was pre-94. And then Nederburg obviously is one that's also successful. And then there's 2 or 3 estates that I think does really well. Simonsig is one of them that does really well internationally. Kanonkop has got a great name, does internationally well. Beyers Kloof has also got good traction in the international market, but very much Pinotage as a variety is very strange. You either love it or you hate it. Now, I think the Pinotages nowadays are a lot better than what we used to make. So because I called the old Pinotage, I called hardware store wines. I mean, they were Rusty Nails, Duco, Paint Stripper, all those horrible flavors. Nowadays, they like all fruit, and it's more the Pinot Noir type of characters that you want in a good Pinotage. I remember when I was with Bellingham still, I made a wine, the Bernard series, Bushvine Pinotage, and it was chosen at Decanter as the best red wine in the world. And that was really, for us, quite a compliment because it's a blind tasting, and you don't get preconceived ideas then of you tasting Pinotage, so the judges need to taste it just as a good red wine. And that was amazing for us, but it was a European palate. The same wine was entered into a competition in America. The sugar was adjusted a little bit, but it didn't even get a bronze. So in the same year, same vintage. So it shows you just how people change, or how palates, again, are different. But Pinotage is, according to Sabas and the statistics, the Pinotage wine from South Africa gets an average 3 rand a litre more on the bulk wine price than anything else, any other red. So which means that there is definitely a premium in planting Pinotage, and there's some of the international markets that only want Pinotage. For that reason, it's the same as Australian Shiraz or New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. You want this unique selling point. That brings me to the variety. I think that we've got the best, that we can do the best currently, and that we're really riding the wave of, say, it's a honeymoon phase, and that's Chenin Blanc. So that's really, for me, a variety from South Africa that I haven't seen a country who doesn't like it. But it's got a great appeal when it comes to matching food. It's got wide recognition because of France doing it as well. And we partner up with France. I mean, And that's part of the international reach, is obviously exchanging information. So we need to be seen as experts in our field. So I, for instance, attended a conference last year where I spoke about Chenin Blanc in Angers, which is the heart of France and Chenin country. But they wanted to know from us actually what's going on. On the lighter side, the theme was about climate change. And this, I don't know if you guys know Marco Ventrella, who's the viticulturist for KWD. He went with me. So he was doing a thing about Chenin Blanc and temperature maps and heat maps. And just before his talk, they had all the French, or they had a French scientist. Now, you can't, they do translation with little earphones because the conference is actually in French, because most of the people were French there. But then they talk about the maps and the heat, and 2 degrees difference would make this such a crisis, and they really went all out. And then at some point you see, okay, it's becoming more political now because of the government not giving enough money, and so then they stop translating, but they're fighting in French. But so then the moral of the story was, the part that I want to get to is Chenin and Marco then came about, and he showed the temperature maps where Chenin actually does well, and where they were worried about 24 degrees Celsius on average, the temperature in France. We were already having it at 30 degrees Celsius, and it was fine. So we just said, you can have 3 global warmings, it's fine. Chenin actually can handle this. So with one 15-minute session, he actually blew out of the water all the research that was done, because there was proof in it. So we've actually been handling the climate change that they think we're going to have.
Brilliant.
It's very resistant.
Niël,
it's very resistant.
Yeah, I think we're going to run out of time. I'm going to lose you